Not every great movie twist needs to be a huge surprise, and some are certainly more obvious than others. Many of the neatest twists, though, foreshadow the big reveal in advance, in a way that makes revisiting the movie a real treat. And then there are those clues left in plain sight by filmmakers, and yet, for one reason or another, viewers en masse opted to ignore them. Perhaps you assumed the giveaway was actually a mistake on the part of the directors, a continuity error or strange artistic quirk, rather than a neon signposted indication that nothing was actually as it seemed. But where genius filmmakers are concerned, almost nothing is ever accidental, and so many of these sneaky hints prove beyond any and all doubt. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 movie plot twist clues we all ignored. Number 10. Tyler exits the wrong side of the crashed car. Fight Club. Near the end of Fight Club, Tyler Durden is driving a car with the narrator in the passenger seat. Durden eventually relinquishes control of the wheel, and soon enough the car veers off the road, crashes, and flips over. When the pair exit the overturned vehicle though, Durden emerges from the passenger door. On initial viewing, anyone who caught this surely brushed it off as a rare bout of sloppiness on the part of director David Fincher, a continuity error not to be given much thought. Except this is instead hinting at the megaton plot twist dropped about 10 minutes later that Tyler and the narrator are the same person, disassociated personalities existing within the same body. Tyler exits the passenger door because the two characters are one and the same. The lesson here? Nothing David Fincher does is by accident, and he'd never make a mistake this blatant unless it was actually on purpose. Number 9. Eli walks into a chair. The Book of Eli. The Book of Eli may not be a great movie, but it does offer up an amusingly ridiculous climactic plot twist that nomadic badass protagonist Eli, as portrayed by Denzel Washington, is actually blind and has incredibly managed to conceal this fact from everyone he encounters, best of all the audience. But there are some subtle hints early on, namely when Eli enters a dilapidated house in the movie's first few minutes, he walks directly into a chair. It's a brief moment that the audience might simply dismiss as a mistake that the filmmakers kept in the film for some reason. Perhaps it was the best take they had. Yet, given that the film otherwise establishes Eli as a dexterous, unstoppable badass, it's odd to show him being so clumsy. But of course, there's a very real purpose to it, to hint that all is not as it seems, and as incredible as Eli's blind navigation skills are, he's also not superhuman. Number 8. Marcy doesn't disturb the pigeons. A Beautiful Mind. In Ron Howard's Oscar-winning biopic A Beautiful Mind, Russell Crowe's John Nash takes a trip to Princeton University and meets up with his old friend Charles and also Charles's niece Marcy. Charles tells Marcy not to run too far, at which point we see her galloping across a field filled with pigeons. Despite her fast, frantic movements though, the pigeons strangely don't move an inch. You might assume that this was simply a case of the pigeons being added to the scene for ambience in post-production and a visual effects artist getting sloppy by not having them fly away when Marcy approaches them. But in fact, it's actually slightly foreshadowing the big twist that Nash is suffering from schizophrenia, and as a result both Charles and Marcy only exist in his imagination. The pigeons don't move because, of course, there's nobody actually running up to them. Number 7. Mother is stiff as a corpse. Psycho. Near the end of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, Norman Bates has an argument with his mother before picking her up and taking her down from her room to the fruit cellar. While he's moving her down the stairs, she shouts at Norman to put her down, yet it's hilariously obvious that Anthony Perkins isn't actually carrying a real person, it's very clearly a mannequin instead. On a first viewing, this seems like a gaffe on Hitchcock's part that he framed the shot in such a way as to accidentally reveal the artifices of it, but in actual fact that's not really true at all. At the very end of the film, it's of course revealed that Mother has been dead for an entire decade, yet Norman has been treating her mummified corpse as though she was still very much alive. As such, it makes absolute sense that Mother seems a bit, well, brittle and stiff when he's carrying her, because she totally is. Number 6. Verbal shoe isn't scuffed. The Usual Suspects. The Usual Suspects boasts one of the most ingeniously executed, mind-blowing plot twists in the history of cinema, that the shadowy crime lord known as Kaiser Soze is none other than Verbal Kint, the very criminal being interrogated by Agent Kujan throughout the entire movie. Kint walks with a limp due to his cerebral palsy, but at the film's end he dramatically ditches the limp to reveal that this was simply another affected aspect of his character. Yet there's a very early, very subtle clue that Kint isn't actually who he says he is. In the opening minutes of the film, when we first meet him, the camera pans up from Kint's shoes, where we see him limping and dragging his shoes across the prison floor. But if you slow the scene down or pause it, you can easily tell that Kint's shoe isn't remotely scuffed up, as you'd expect from somebody dragging their shoe across the floor every day of their life. Sure, it's possible that Kint just bought a new pair of shoes, and on a first viewing you'd probably dismiss this as a lack of attention to detail on the part of the filmmakers, but it's actually an upfront tell that Kint's talking and acting out of his ass. Number 5. All the Anachronisms. The Village. M. Night Shyamalan's The Village may be seen as a disappointment by many, but its big plot twist certainly lands with flabbergasting impact regardless. After leading viewers to believe that the movie is set in the 19th century, it's eventually revealed that the story takes place in the present day, and the village of Covington is a commune intentionally walled off from the outside world by its well-minted elders. Yet there are some major tells from the very start of the movie by way of its production design. Most of the buildings we see are constructed of modern materials, such as vinyl siding, which wasn't used on American homes until around 1950, many years before the film is allegedly set. There are also some giveaways in the characters' period costumes, such as ties and other garments that wouldn't have existed until the 1970s. But given how firmly committed the movie's marketing was to presenting the village as a period thriller, most would surely assume these hints were actually just careless mistakes on the part of the production design and costume departments. Say what you will about Shyamalan, but he loves to labour over small details, so there's no way he would have let these blatant anachronisms slip through the cracks. They were supposed to playfully, slyly point the audience in the right direction. Number 4. Adelaide snaps her fingers on the offbeat. Us. Props to Jordan Peele for even daring to hide this hint in the first trailer for his hit horror film Us. Early in the movie, protagonist Adelaide is in the car with her family when Luna's I Got 5 on It plays over the radio and she starts snapping her fingers along to the tune. If you're paying attention though, you might notice that Adelaide isn't snapping her fingers on the downbeat, the 2 and the 4, as you'd expect, but rather the offbeat, the 1 and the 3. This is especially concerning given that Adelaide has a childhood background in dance and should therefore have a keen sense of rhythm. This turns out to be pivotal at film's end then when we learn that Adelaide has actually been her doppelganger Red all along, having swapped places with Adelaide when they were both children. As such, that's why she snaps her fingers on the offbeat, because she's the wrong Adelaide, the doppelganger who is out of place and so lacks the rhythm that the real Adelaide would have. Number 3. The presence of flip phones. Final Destination 5. You can't really be blamed for failing to fish out the plot twist in a Final Destination movie. After all, the twists typically amount to they all die in the end, and they're hardly the sorts of movies that audiences expect brain-melting surprises from, right? But Final Destination 5 actually cooks up a genuinely clever rug pull by revealing in its final moments that the movie is a prequel to the original Final Destination, with the surviving characters ultimately being killed off by the first film's doomed airline flight. It was a brilliant shock, albeit one which was signposted in one major way: technology. Keep your eyes peeled throughout the film and you won't see a single smartphone in sight. Everybody's rocking flip phones because, of course, it's actually set in the year 1999. Flip phones had pretty much died out entirely by 2009, 2 years before the film's release, and so for anyone who was paying close attention, it was either a slight indicator that some chicanery was afoot or that the prop department lazily cut corners by recycling old props. Number 2. Luke doesn't leave footprints on CRAIT. Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Star Wars: The Last Jedi climaxes with Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker duking it out on the salt planet CRAIT. But when Kylo Ren finally makes contact with Luke, he realises that Luke isn't actually there, having force projected himself from the planet of Ak-2 and providing a distraction which allows the Resistance to escape. There's one big clue though: keep an eye on Luke's feet throughout the scene and you'll notice that his movements don't create any footprints on CRAIT's surface to reveal the red floor underneath, as they do whenever Kylo Ren moves. Director Rian Johnson even makes a point of focusing on their respective foot movements in a few key shots, but at that moment first-time viewers were probably more likely to chalk it down to a technical error on Johnson's part than a genuine indication of what was to come. Number 1. Chuck struggles to unholster his gun. Shutter Island. The marketing for Martin Scorsese's Shutter Island made it pretty damn clear that nothing was quite as it seemed, and long before the movie's release, many guessed that there would be a plot twist related to the identity of US Marshal protagonist Teddy Daniels, as played by Leonardo DiCaprio. What they didn't count on though was the bigger picture, that in addition to Daniels not being who he says he is, neither is his partner, Mark Ruffalo's Chuck. As it turns out, the events of the movie are largely part of an elaborate roleplay intended to cure Daniels, real name Andrew Ladis, of his delusions after murdering his wife. Chuck is really Andrew's doctor, Dr. Lester Sheehan, and the proof that he's not really a US Marshal is basically there during one of the film's establishing scenes. When Teddy and Chuck first arrive on Shutter Island, they're asked to hand over their weapons to Deputy Warden McPherson, and promptly do so. But Chuck first struggles to unholster his gun for a few seconds, at which point both McPherson and Teddy stare at him with a look that seems to say, "What the hell, man?" Yet this is obviously because Dr. Sheehan isn't used to handling a gun, and the look of exasperation on McPherson's face is probably his irritation at having to enact this farce. But when it first happens, we as audience members likely pawn it off as a slightly eccentric character affectation for Chuck, and that he's a little wet around the ears, rather than an indication that he might be an imposter. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below, and whilst you're there, let us know of any other movie plot twists that had some pretty obvious clues along the way, if only we were all paying attention. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit that notification bell. I've been Cy for What Culture, and have a good week.